Natal Mercury Retrograde. In this video, I'm going to be breaking down Natal Mercury Retrograde, everything you need to know about having Natal Mercury Retrograde, and important takeaways, how to master this. I'm going to really break this down in detail. All right, so let's begin. So when you have Natal Mercury Retrograde, you were born when transit Mercury was retrograde. That's what it means. If you look at your chart and you see a RX by your natal Mercury, that means that you were born when transit Mercury was retrograde, meaning when you were born at that time, transit Mercury was retrograde. Mercury represents our minds and mental patterns, how we think, speak, and learn. Okay, that's what Mercury represents. It represents our minds and mental patterns, how we think, speak, and learn. Retrograde represents a time period of reflecting and reassessing matters. Okay, so Mercury, our mind, mental patterns. Retrograde represents a time period of reflecting and reassessing matters. Having natal Mercury retrograde, it makes you naturally a very reflective person, right? Because Mercury, again, has to do with our mind and mental patterns. Retrograde has to do with reflecting and reassessing. So when you have natal Mercury retrograde, it makes you naturally a very reflective person. You're way more reflective than the average person because you were born when transit Mercury was retrograde. It matters more what sign and house your natal Mercury retrograde is in. Okay. I've had people email me and, leave comments always asking me questions like, well, I don't understand my Mercury retrograde. I don't get it. Like, what does it mean to have Mercury retrograde? What I will tell you is that it matters more the sign and house your natal Mercury retrograde is in versus it being retrograde. It matters more as far as the sign and house. For example, someone who has Mercury in Libra in the 9th house and it's retrograde. Okay, so the Mercury retrograde is not the important part. The important part is the sign and house that's retrograde. So like, for example, someone who has this, Mercury in Libra represents someone who thinks about relationships and partnerships, fairness and compromise, beauty, peace and harmony all the time. And then the 9th house, having Mercury in the 9th house, this represents someone who is always thinking about long distance travel, higher education, philosophy, higher knowledge. So when you combine everything, when you combine Mercury and Libra in the 9th house retrograde, this is a person that is here in this life to spend a lot of time reflecting and reassessing on matters that have to do with relationships and partnerships as it relates to higher knowledge, higher education, long distance travel, right? So that's how you put all the pieces together. You have to look at the sign and the house that your Mercury is in and put all the pieces together and see what exactly are you going to spend a lot of time reflecting on in this life. What type of matters are you going to spend a lot of time reflecting on, right? So this person is going to spend a lot of time reflecting on relationships and partnerships as it relates to higher knowledge, higher education, and long distance travel. All right. So that's how you do it. That's how you make the connection. Mercury retrograde makes you sometimes hold back your ideas and thoughts out of fear of being ridiculed or misunderstood. A lot of times when people have natal Mercury retrograde is they tend to keep their ideas and their thoughts to themselves because they don't want, they have a fear of being ridiculed, people saying that their idea is stupid, that doesn't make sense, or being misunderstood. They have a fear of being misunderstood. Having natal Mercury retrograde, you may have had learning difficulties to overcome growing up, like, for example, dyslexia or some form of autism, something like that. A lot of time people with natal Mercury retrograde, they tend to have some kind of learning difficulty growing up. This doesn't mean that will happen to you. It's just this is a pattern that tends to be seen. And it doesn't mean that you're stupid. For example, if you look at a celebrity example, Frank Ocean has natal Mercury retrograde, and he's considered one of the greatest musicians ever. He's written songs for Beyonce. So he's clearly not stupid. If you go on to be so successful that, you get nominated for Grammys and you can write for one of the greatest entertainers ever, you're clearly an intelligent person. All right. Email me if you still have more questions. And if you still don't understand, my email is astrologyztv@gmail.com. Thank you for watching. Like, share, subscribe, comment down below. You take care.